it could be a little bit disorientating. Kind of feels tutorial.
The movement sucks.
It's not really doing too much different.
Gun movement sucks.
Oh lord. Oh jeez, this is...
Oh, I can just go out the door.
Melee sucks.
I'm disappointed with Bonelab.
Frame rate sucks.
I found myself clipping through objects and even one time clipping through the entire map.
Stuttering sucks.
Totally unrealistic.
Freezing sucks. Playing each and every level, waiting 5 minutes a load screen, go in and out, sucks.
Bonelab Sucks. Apparently, Bonelab, the highly anticipated sequel to 2019's Boneworks, one of the most game-changing, unbelievable technical feats in VR of all time, second to Half-Life Alyx, has just released on both PC VR and Quest. And it's f***ing incredible, amazing, trash, best game ever, dumpster fire, I can't stop playing, I hate this game, it makes me Conversations around this game have been a bit of a cluster. Either enthusiasts are shitting their brains out over how it's the most game-changing of all game changers, or others upset over the game because it's motion sickening, other people like it, so I don't like it, too expensive, why is it not free to play, it offended me, mom come pick me up. So I think you can already tell what my position is here. I'm more so in the camp of uncontrollably shit. But I'm making this video as a time capsule for others like you to look back on and remember this sort of storm of alternating opinion pieces regarding this game and why this divisive reaction from the VR community even happened to begin with, as well as getting to the core of, is this game even worth it, especially for a slightly higher than average price tag. And yes, I will be talking about that scene towards the end of the video, but until then, no spoilers at all for this whole video. So I'm wrapping up the absolute clusterfuck that is Bonelab and the community surrounding it into one chimp brain video by a chimp brain for you fellow chimp brains. Also, I'm trying to hit 1 million chimp brains by the end of the year, so a like and sub would be very much appreciated. Also, check out my Discord server to directly talk to me. Not that anyone would want to, but you're welcome to at me 50 times and get auto banned. So I have played Bonelab. Full disclosure, I have not finished the game. These are my thoughts after a good solid few hours of playtime. And whoa, this game is Boneworks, but with less direction. See, without spoiling anything, the game opens up pretty freaking quickly from the very beginning, allowing you to explore different game modes and paths almost right from the start. And this is where our first point of contention arises. With the modern age of nanny games telling you what to do, where to go, how to do it, press X button to do this, follow compass to go here, follow this marker to go here, Bonelab will act like a total slap in the face of many modern gamers. So I'm not exactly surprised that there are people who don't even know how to progress through the story asking for help on places like Reddit. Let me be clear, I don't think this is Stress Level Zero's fault. Sure, you could easily make the argument of, well, if your players don't even know how to play the story, then you've failed as a developer. I mean, I will happily admit, as you can see from some of this footage, there are moments where I really have to look around to figure out what to do next. See, through playing so many modern hand-holding games, I've gotten used to being constantly told what to do, and honestly, I'm not used to engaging my brain in a video game the same way I'd have to in a real-life situation. Not that I engage my brain in a real-life situation either. And this is where Bonelab's genius comes through very clearly. Through less direction, this game feels as if it has more direction than Stress Level Zero's previous game, Boneworks, which had a pretty clear level design and story path for the player to take before the game opened up more and allowed you to select individual game modes. Bonelab works in the opposite direction entirely. You get a short, vague little prologue before entering the Bonelab itself. You're presented with a range of familiar game modes from Boneworks and then are left to just figure out the game on your own. Just like if you discovered an underground research lab in real life. You feel like an actual individual trying to uncover what is really going on in this simulation, reading clipboards from employees, reading writing on walls, exploring new areas. I feel like I am the one making these decisions, not the game. This is exactly how a virtual reality game should play. Not a virtual mobile game, not a virtual story game, not a virtual mini game, not a virtual objective simulator, a virtual reality, forcing you as an individual to explore and figure out what to do next. Think for yourself as if you are this character if you are in this world. So I'm not surprised, especially with the saturation of very light, easy to pick up VR games that dominate the Quest store, that some find Bonelab a little intense. Bonelab's release has very clearly shed a light on how complacent with mediocrity, ease of use, and borderline mobile minigame dominated the VR space has become. Not to shit on any of those games. I love Beat Saber. Saber. I love 11 Table Tennis. I love all of these games. I've sunk a lot of time into them, but they're not all what VR can and should be. Bonelab, I think, has come at the perfect time to finally disrupt this little cushy cloud that many average VR users have been sat on. Reading through some of the reviews on the Quest Store, it's very clear here there are a lot of users who flat out just don't get it. They don't understand the significance of a game with this magnitude, this disruptive, and this unique coming to a native platform. That said, I did begin to roll my eyes after hitting yet another physics puzzle to solve, as Bonelab definitely is not even slightly perfect. Now, I mentioned some reviewing this game on the Quest Store just didn't get it. And while that's true for some people, there's plenty, and I mean plenty, of valid criticisms. This game is definitely shielded by a pretty strong hype train suit of armor. It's very clear Stress Level Zero put the Quest 2 and native VR play first. It's clear that this game is intended as more of an attempt to get the Boneworks engine running in some capacity on Quest rather than a fully fledged Boneworks sequel. And it's not perfect yet. I've already dealt with a few pretty consistent frame rate drops, freezes, stutters, and even motion sickness, something I haven't experienced in years induced by poor performance. It's important to note that I didn't experience this with Boneworks, and I honestly thought that by this point I was basically immune to motion sickness entirely. Every time I began to feel sick, it seemed to be directly caused via frame rate drops or stutters or sequences of physics puzzles where things didn't behave as you'd expect, and I'd be forcefully pushed around while trying to move a box. It's astounding that Stress Level Zero even got this game running in a playable state on what is literally a mobile phone chip powered wireless VR headset. It's an important step that needed to be taken for the future of native VR, but it does fundamentally, whether you like it or not, drag the game down. Physics are limited, as you can see here. I'm using the gravity gun on some cones that only have partial physics. Spawning in more than a couple of NPCs drops my frame rate through the floor. Any more than a few moving objects drops my frame rate through the floor, to a point where these physics puzzles that I previously mentioned became an annoying chore because I knew my headset would start chugging. And on top of this, when the game does run well, the physics, at least on Quest, feel more janky and imprecise than in Boneworks. Sometimes accidentally lifting your body instead of objects, wonky ladder climbing, objects generally not behaving how you'd expect, and all of this made anything physics related honestly just annoying, which is a pretty major problem for a physics-based game. Now, from watching fellow other VR YouTubers play Bonelabs on PC VR, the physics generally seem far more on par with that of 2019's Boneworks. Now, I'd love to test this for myself, but after my first index's displays fried themselves, only to get a replacement index whose displays also failed, this time after just a couple of months of very light use. Honestly, I don't even know why I own this thing. 99% of the time it's broken, and my Quest link cable is too short, so native Quest play, like how the vast majority of you guys are going to experience this game, is how I've also experienced it. So if the physics and overall gameplay functions better on PC VR, take my previous complaints as Quest specific issues. And they do seem to be experienced by a lot of other users in many of the reviews of this game on the Quest Store, many complaining of janky gameplay and performance issues. Talking about Quest specific issues, one of my moderators has already begun to experience his Quest overheating after playing the game, forcing his headset to shut off entirely. I don't know how widespread this issue is, but considering the performance that I and others have been getting, I'm not exactly surprised if this will be an issue for other users too. The important thing to note with all of this performance talk is Stress Level Zero have made it very clear this game is intended to be built upon over time. This is their first native Quest game, and what they have achieved at launch is honestly very impressive. I'd expect SLZ to continue to hone in performance over the life cycle of this game, and for many of these issues that I've listed to end up being temporary, hopefully. And although these are all major pains in the ass, don't get me wrong, there are times where I just rage quit this game. I'm not gonna knock the game itself for it. Is the gameplay actually good? Does it improve upon Boneworks? Will this gameplay carry the game for years to come with its modding community? Maybe? Yes. See, this is a difficult one. Bonelabs doesn't actually really do anything that differently from Boneworks. I mean, outside of a few tweaks and the avatar gameplay mechanic, this is fundamentally just Boneworks, and there's nothing wrong with that. Boneworks strive to be the most realistic and fundamentally satisfying VR experience there is, and I think it achieved that with flying colors, so why change it? I'm glad Stress Level Zero didn't try to with the systems they have in place too much and instead opted to build a clear base for future content on a more far-reaching platform like the Quest. The level design, though, it at least from what I've played so far, feels both like an improvement over Boneworks and a regression at the same time. There are moments of innovative gameplay, like when you first power up the lab and have to use this crane thing to carry orbs around, or this sick minecart level that nearly melted my quest with how performance heavy it was. And then there's areas like this one that very clearly feel like unfinished and slightly janky levels, which I think is sometimes the point due to the meta nature of the game, but I don't think it excuses what, at least to me, just feels like level design. Like here, I don't even know if I completed this physics puzzle correctly with this cart and a sign I could lower, and I had this orb that I ended up dragging around for some reason, and it turned out I don't think I even needed it, and I got past the level anyway. It was just weird, and I think I did something wrong, but I still got through it, which I kind of like that you can do, and that you're not forced into completing levels exactly how they were intended, but it also feels just jank and unfinished. The gunplay is still very satisfying generally, but I may be going insane when I say this, but it doesn't feel quite as good as it does in Boneworks. Recoil feels arcadey and flat to me. Two-handed weapons a lot of the times feel flat out bad, particularly on the quest, as the headset's cameras can't make out which controller is which when they're near each other. Not really Stress Level Zero's fault, but I would like to have seen more of like a virtual stock that would try and account for the quest losing tracking for brief moments, rather than your gun just sporadically flipping around at times. There seems to be some level of weapon stabilization anyway, but it can feel kind of hit or miss, especially when trying to look down the sights, which I honestly just gave up on half the time. I've played plenty of Quest 2 FPS games now that don't have as much of an issue with this as Bonelab does, so I would like to see at least some Quest 2 specific tweaks to two-handed weapons to make them feel a little less The submachine gun that you get near the beginning of the game felt like utter dog to me. I ended up just ditching it for pistols. The shotguns feel awesome though. Stress Level Zero crushed it on those. Thumbstick movement feels a little sluggish and unresponsive at times. I tried different thumbstick modes, but it still felt either way. It's super difficult to make any precise movements, especially when you're trying to parkour, which is a real problem when there's literally an entire section of the game dedicated to parkour. Maybe this is just me not being used to the physics system yet, but at the moment, movement in general feels sluggish a lot of the time. And I'm not the only person that thinks this. In fact, the vast majority of negative reviews regarding this game seem to be talking about exactly what I've listed so far. I'm sure Stress Level is fully aware of these issues and will continue to tinker and tweak until the game feels as good as humanly possible. Never have I had such trust in a game studio. Never have I seen such love for a group of developers. Never have I seen a game director interact so directly and openly with the community. Just watching Brandon talk about Bonelab makes me excited. And honestly, I think a lot of the hype train for this game was out of pure love for not only the first game, but also the love for Brandon and Stress Level Zero. You understand why they made certain creative decisions, design decisions, gameplay decisions, because Brandon is generally pretty open in his thinking process, both in videos and via Twitter. I have the utmost trust that Brandon and his team will work on this game non-stop until it's where they want it to be. And to be very clear, this game, all things considered, is in a pretty good place. It needs work, sure, but what we have in Bonelab right now is an astounding technical feat for the quest, and I'm not surprised many don't get it. This is more than just a fun VR game. This is literally a fundamental stepping stone for the future of VR as a whole. Mate, I sounded like thrill seeker, bro. If you're an average player with no context stepping into Bonelab for the first time, with no past experience with Boneworks, yeah, you're likely gonna have a time and be put off because this game wasn't designed for you. This game wasn't designed to be an easily accessible, easily digestible, processed, colorful mobile minigame that so many quest games have become. We should be honestly pretty grateful that we even have Stress Level Zero. VR recently, particularly on the quest, has been dead as man. There's been some good releases, but it's been pretty dire generally. We have a lot to owe to Stress Level Zero, and I can't wait to see what they do with Bonelab and where it goes in the future. Now finally, that scene. So some people got a little upset. Some people went to Twitter and got a little more upset over one specific, slightly controversial scene right at the beginning of Bonelab. Spoilers for like the first minute of the game. After creating your character, you're promptly provided with a noose to literally yourself. You're then publicly by a village, only to cut yourself free at the last second to fall down a hole that eventually leads you to the Bonelab. Now, some have considered this scene to be insensitive, offensive, triggering, may risk others to potentially themselves. Sorry, I'm gonna be pretty liberal with my censoring here. YouTube gets super touchy about any of these words. Now, while I respect everyone's opinion, in reality, I don't. I think if you're gonna make the argument that this scene may cause people to themselves? Are you also going to make the argument that beating people to death with a guitar or shooting people like you do throughout this game is also going to cause users to do that too? No, I doubt you're going to try and make that argument. I think this scene served its purpose. It was an effective opening to the game as a whole and properly set the reality questioning vibe for the rest of the game. Recently, Superhot removed a scene in which you shoot yourself. It was a very effective and trippy reality questioning scene that has now been lost due to babying the average player. Now, believe it or not, much worse happens in real life than virtually yourself in a video game or virtually shooting yourself in a video game. This is gonna sound very pandery, but let's be honest, there are bigger things to focus on in the world, and I think it's a waste of time and energy to get upset over a creative narrative decision like this. Sure, maybe a warning for sensitive players would be nice, but let's be honest, you're about to play a relatively realistic game where you question reality while shooting your way through waves of enemies and playing bowling with a gravity gun. Anyway, have you guys tried Bonelab? Please tell me in the comments down below. Also, check out my Discord at discord.gg/GetHip. Also, check out my Instagram. I went to Amsterdam. That's why this video is so freaking late. So, check out my posts from Amsterdam on Instagram. Not that anyone cares about what I do. Okay, bye-bye.